This is True Talk on WMNF 88.5 with Ahmed and Samar. Thank you for all our listener supporters have been asking about us past week. We are still here at WMNF. Samar and I just had a break around the New Year's. And yeah, so a lot is happening in the news. A lot is happening all over the world. Things you just can't keep up with it. And, we only have our shows on once a week. But right now, people are beating the drums to war with Iran. What's happening there? And do you support, efforts to try to do regime change in Iran? All of a sudden, it's coming out of nowhere. It's time for Iran to go down. And Trump saying his help is on the way. But he kind of backtracked last night. So for a while, the stock market was volatile. Crude oil was going up. Even gold and silver spiked. And then all of a sudden, after last night's comments, things plummeted as far as crude oil and price of silver. Not necessarily silver and precious metals, but it did go down a bit. So anyway, we're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about Venezuela, even though Venezuela is outside, but what's the connection to the Middle East? And we're also going to take some phone calls. So since wasn't here past couple of weeks, we'll take some phone calls, get your feedback. This is True Talk on WMNF 88.5. We'll be right back after this short break.
يحبوا يقصوا لجناحي قولي ذكراني مخنوق ومنك طالب اسماحي
هما كلها موحلة دق 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 كلها تشوف الدنيا كحلة سحرة قحلة دق 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 بس تشوف الدنيا أحلى والحومة مفحلة دق 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 تستنى في عسل النحلة سابورة كحلة هسنا الطيار والمنافع قبل رحلة ضايع بين الحيوت وما لقيتش بلاصة حومة بين بلاد الهوت يما خلوني بالشيخة مسموت وحكموا ناس الراقة والكراسي بالهبوط نحب نشد الروت ونقلب المناظر نقلب وجهي من هنا يما ما نحب نعيش الأحياء بالموت نوفا كيما ولد الجارة بالشيخة تبلا
يا ليلي ويا ليلى وش باش نشكيلك يما وقالوا لي ليلى صغير وفي قلبي غمة حب نطير ونطير الفوق يحبوا يقصوا لجناحي قولي ذكراني مخنوق ومنك طالب اسماحي
ريوس الرجالة ميلة رزنك بالتخمام وبالشيخة مخاخة مبيلة ولاد الحومة اشواتنا مقايلة شرف العينين بالخير ماهيش مستفايلة حبوا يسوقونا كيف الزيلة ومربط في زريبة وخطوة السكينة مكيلة يحبوك بري ما عندك شي عايلة نعيشوا في سيستم حكمه ولاد المتحيلة يحبوك غايب على الوجود ساكت على حقك وراضي باللي يحبوه موجود يما تجري وماكش خالط على الكوت مش خلى اولاد الحومة قطع من الحدود ايدو في قفصك مربوط وذباع مسيب وزيدك لك عشاك يما حبوك قاعد في زنقة مرفوض والمستقبل اللي تشوف فيه متعدي بحذاك
يا ليلي ويا ليلى وش باش نشكيلك يما وقالوا لي ليلى صغير وفي قلبي غمة حب نطير ونطير الفوق يحبوا يقصوا لجناحي قولي ذكراني مخنوق ومنك طالب اسماحي يا ليلي يا ليلى وش باش نشكيلك يما وقالوا لي ليلى صغير وفي قلبي غمة حب نطير ونطير الفوق يحبوا يقصوا لجناحي قولي ذكراني مخنوق ومنك طالب اسماحي.
So welcome back to True Talk on WMNF 80.5 with Ahmed and Samar. This is the True Talk radio show right here on WMNF. It's live right now. I'm live in the studio. And you're new to our show. This is a global affairs show with a focus on relations with the Middle East, Muslim world, Arab world, foreign policy towards that region. We've been on the air since 2003, and Just seems like it's 2003 all over again. I remember when our show first came on. It was right before the invasion of Iraq, and Samar and I were saying it's a bad idea. Don't do it. This is wrong. America has no business liberating the Iraqis. They don't want you there. Sure, Saddam Hussein is a dictator, but since when does America go into countries to remove dictators and bring freedom? Historically, the United States does what's in the interest of the oligarchs and in our national security interest, in America's national security interest, not necessarily for the reasons of human rights and liberating the Iraqi people. And it's the same story today. I mean, the double standards and the hypocrisy that you hear, and as far as a justification to bombing or attacking Iran now, is that people need freedom. And people, yes? Is everything okay?
Well, I just have to put the screen up.
Oh, okay. No, I'll do that. So we're going to take some phone calls eventually, but right now we're not taking phone calls. So our producer just came in to say that, there are people calling, but we haven't asked for phone calls yet. So let me, we'll get into that in a bit. If you want to call in now and stay on hold, that's fine, but you are not going to take the calls for probably another 15, 20 minutes or so. So, it's going to war with Iran right now. There are reports of heavy security presence in Tehran amid lingering U.S.-Iran tensions. That's what Al Jazeera is saying. A senator, pro-Trump senator, just said that the idea that Trump is not going to attack Iran is beyond inaccurate. So maybe is Trump just bluffing? Senator Lindsey Graham just said this in a post on X. Graham said the circumstances around the necessary decisive action to be taken against the evil Iranian regime have nothing to do with President Trump's will or determination. Quite the opposite. Stay tuned, he added. I mean, I remember the last time Trump attacked Iran, he kind of downplayed like it wasn't going to happen. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he did send the bombers to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. And it was while there were some negotiations, so people were saying, well, he was throwing them off. So is it more of the same now or not? Also being reported that a network linked to Israel pushes to shape external Iran protest narrative. And transcendent moments in geopolitics that... So in recent weeks, as protests erupted in Iran, the hashtag quote or hashtag Free the Persian People trended on X. The campaign was accompanied by a flood of posts saying of an imminent decisive moment in Iran's history and presenting themselves as authentic voices of the people of Iran. And so some analysts that track the sources of this interaction and the dissemination path uncovers the digital campaign did not originate organically from within Iran. Instead, it was spearheaded by external networks, primarily accounts linked to Israel or pro-Israel circles that played a central role in manufacturing the momentum and steering the discourse towards specific geopolitical goals. That's an article that's also showing in Al Jazeera. So if you're seeing this whole thing about Iran on your feed and people are talking about it as if there's just imminent threat and tens of thousands of people being killed, it may not necessarily be factually accurate. there is some manufacturing dissent happening here, or manufacturing consent that's playing out. And that's the problem now, especially with these social media platforms, including X and Facebook. I was just on Facebook yesterday. I don't know. I think I was looking at something at the marketplace because I don't really get my news from Facebook. And all of a sudden, this one very staunchly pro-Iran woman in the diaspora was, I think, who lives in Canada, who is strongly supportive of the Crown Prince of Iran, which really Iran doesn't have a Crown Prince. The Shah, who was overthrown in 1979, he had a son. He went in exile, and his son, I think at the time was, I don't know, 6 or 7, and has lived in the United States. So he's claiming to be the Crown Prince of Iran. Iran doesn't have a monarchy, doesn't have a Shah, and for him to be claiming that is just ridiculous. But anyway, this woman, who I don't follow on Facebook or on social media, came up on my feed. I'm wondering, why are they pushing this woman? So these social media platforms are somehow in bed with sometimes foreign governments, sometimes the United States, administration, to amplify certain voices and certain messages that they want to push out. I remember the days when social media was something like, oh yeah, this is evening the playing field with big media. Well, it seems like governments have been able to manipulate that now, and they're still being able to push out the government narratives or the oligarch narrative. It's not necessarily giving voice to the people. So other headlines that are also happening today in Iran that I'm reading, it says, what's behind the anti-U.S. chants from Iran to South America down, and because these are what's being chanted in other places. So a lot of this, people around the world are seeing through this, that, the attack on Venezuela, kidnapping Maduro, then going after Iran, threatening Cuba, going after Denmark. How is this all playing out? And this was supposed to be the government or the administration or the regime that promised that they're against regime change. And it's America first, and not getting involved with other countries' business. I mean, on its surface, America First is a great idea. I support America First if it means less wars, peace around the world, not intervening in other people's business. What business do we have to try to interfere and use our resources as Americans to bomb another country because there are protests that are happening there? There are protests happening here in America. There are tens of thousands of people that protested, hundreds of thousands of people that protested against the genocide in Gaza, on college campuses and other places, and there are people that were beaten. Does that make it right now, for other countries, other governments to say, well, we don't like what's happening, how America is treating its people, let's go over there and bomb them? We wouldn't accept that here. So how is it okay that the United States would consider attacking another, sovereign country, regardless of how they are? That's not really what our resources should be used for. And anytime our military, our government gets involved in meddles in other countries' affairs, it's always for another agenda. And right now, I believe the stories and the evidence and the research that really says that Israel and the Netanyahu regime is really pushing for a full-out war against Iran by the United States. They want America to destroy Iran for them, not themselves. Israel doesn't want to go attacking Iran. They don't want to go fight that war. They want to push America to go fight that war for them, just as they did with Iraq. That's what happened. And anyone that tells you that, Israel didn't lobby for that, of course they did. Go back to the hearings, go back to what Netanyahu was doing and lobbying and pushing for the attacks on Iraq, saying that it's a threat to, it's in America's best interest, pushing this narrative of weapons of mass destruction that were never found. It was a big, huge lie. And again, and since then, pushing this narrative that Iran is on the brink of developing nuclear weapons and they have to be stopped. And they succeeded in getting the United States to bomb Iran a few months ago, to bomb their nuclear facilities with these bunker-busting, bombs that only the United States has and Israel does not have. But since things have calmed down a bit, and there's supposedly a ceasefire in Gaza, people thought that, okay, well, those hostilities are over. But now Netanyahu's back at it, pushing for a full-out war against Iran. In reality, it's really on behalf of Israel. And we shouldn't accept that. We should let our politicians know that we shouldn't be bombing other countries. Sure, Iran. I dislike the regime in Iran. I think that they're authoritarian and they don't allow enough freedoms. But that does not mean if the people of Iran want to overthrow their own regime, let them do it on their own. If they can't do it, then maybe they need to keep working at it. But let's not use American resources to go in there and pretend that we care about the people of Iran and freedom there. At the end, all the United States and Israel wants to do, and I'm saying this as somebody who loves the United States. However, when I say the United States, I mean the current government, all the current government and the foreign policy establishment in Washington. What they want to do is install not a democratically elected leader. They want to install another type of dictator that would control the people and be pro-Israel and pro-America. And that's what the Crown Prince is basically saying. If you look at a lot of these anti-Iran protests, they include the old flag of Iran and the flag of Israel. Why is the Israeli flag? Why are they taking the Israeli flag to these protests in Los Angeles and in New York and other places? Why are there so many pro-Israel Zionists involved in those protests, waving the Israeli flag and the old Iran flag? What's the connection between the two? You can't realistically, you can't be somebody who's advocating for human rights in Iran and be waving the Israeli flag. Israel is one of the biggest violators of human rights in the world. Their leaders are wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity and genocide. Most people now, most scholars have ruled and said, including Israeli scholars, that what Israel has done and continues to do in Gaza amounts to genocide. So the same people that were defending Israel's right to continue bombing and massacring tens of thousands of civilians in Gaza are now somehow pro-human rights for the people of Iran. How does that make sense? That is obviously not the agenda here. The agenda here is a type of, they love to have a regime change, not to somebody that will respond to the people of Iran, but another type of dictator. The Shah was a dictator. And the crown prince, the son now that is claiming to be a crown prince, he's not a crown prince. He's just a guy that's been living in America since his father was exiled and has, grown up here. He's never led a government. He's never, his only connection is his father was. So what qualification does he have to go back and rule Iran? But the only thing he's promising is that, he'll be allies with Israel. And let's not forget how the Shah of Iran came to power anyway. In 1953, the United States and Britain, through the CIA and other spy agencies, instigated and coordinated a coup that led to the removal of Mossadegh. He was the prime minister, democratically elected prime minister of Iran in 1953, was overthrown by the United States and Britain through this clandestine operations. Again, to make it look like, and they did carry out this coup and removed Mossadegh and installed the Shah. And for the following, 30-some years, the Shah ruled Iran with an extreme totalitarian regime, banned everything. There was no freedom for the people there. And the result of that, it led to the people that started rebelling, or their way of protest, that they became more and more staunchly religious. And that's how Iran became an Islamic, state or a theocracy, as a response to what the Shah was carrying out, this extreme secular society that banned all religious life. So, every cause, every action has a reaction. If you're going to become extreme, a secular state that tortures people, that imprisons people, that even try to worship, that bans religious activities, that's the response that you're going to have. And now, when the mullahs came in and took over, they went completely the other way. And now, over time, some factions have moderated. I think their current president is somewhat of a pragmatic person, more moderate. I think it's someone that the international community can work with. But, Israel's not having it. They don't want any of the surrounding countries to have any agency. They want them to be all puppet regimes that they can be controlled or fragmented. That's why they want to break up Syria even more. They were happy. Israel was happy during the time that there was a civil war going on in Syria. And they're upset that, that somebody's there now that's trying to unify them. And they want to break that state up. They want Syria to be divided into 2 or 3 parts. They want, even Saudi Arabia to be divided into 2 or 3 parts. They want Iran to be divided. They want these smaller, weaker states around them. That's part of their agenda, and they think that would make them more safe somehow, and they'll continue to be the more powerful nation in the area. Not necessarily by size, but because all the other states around them are also smaller and fragmented. That's what happened in Iraq. Iraq is effectively now like, at least 2 portions. There's a kind of a semi-autonomous region in the north where the Kurds are. And then, you have the southern part, which is led by the Shia, and the Sunnis, who used to control Iraq under Saddam Hussein, are now, weaker. So you have this kind of ongoing polarization and conflict within Iraq that they're not going to become what they were under Saddam, which Israel saw as a threat. So our phone number is 813-239-9663, 813-239-9663. You can call us and we'll take some of your calls. One thing that I wanted to actually play that also happened over in the past couple of days, maybe a day or so ago, was Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State under Trump, who, for whatever reason, upset Trump, and Trump said he's not going to have a role in the future in the current administration, a staunch Zionist and neocon. And here's what Trump said regarding the victims of Gaza at this conference. Let me see if I can play that.
The next generation of young people won't remember.
Okay, hold on. Let me try that again.
Of young people won't remember October 7th in the same way. That's true in Israel and in America and broadly in the world. And we need to make sure two things. One, it's not that we don't forget. We need to make sure that the story is told properly so that when the history books write this, they don't write about the victims of Gaza, right? They can't, the history, and it's, I should be a little more precise. There were victims in Gaza, right? It's true. There are civilian casualties in every war that's ever been fought. But the victims were the people of the nation state of Israel.
This is the kind of they want to rewrite history. They want to deny what actually happened. That, Israel carried out a genocide and continues to do that. Now it's just a slower genocide. They killed tens of thousands of people, at least 20,000 children. There was an attack on October 7th. However, you can't call that genocide. That was a group of armed people that attacked. They attacked Israel or parts, at the border. Definitely attacking any civilian is unacceptable and is a crime. And that's to be condemned. But there's no comparison between what those militants and Hamas fighters did on October 7th and the huge, civilian death count and the massacres and the constant bombings and the destruction of just about every building in Gaza. There's no comparison between the crimes that Israel carried out compared to October 7th. It's not justified. And anyone that tries to justify the genocide that was carried out by Israel in response to October 7th is just delusional or just, justifying the unjustifiable. Just look at the images of what has happened in Gaza and the number of deaths. And, there's all this speculation and all this evidence now that Israel, the surveillance state, the government that has all the tools to know everything is happening, that somehow some people there knew that October 7th was going to take place, and there was an order to stand down. That, there weren't these protections at the border. That was somehow some elements or some segments, and this is what some people are speculating. You can research it yourself and see if it's true or not, that they allowed it to happen. Because there was too many signs and too many people within the military were sounding the alarm, but, it happened anyway, or was allowed to happen. I'm going to take some phone calls. Our phone number is 813-239-9663, or you could email us, dj@wmnf.org. I'm going to go to Jack in Dover. Jack, go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, Jack. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to say when you mentioned, that, you get your news from different sources. Last night, for the first time, I logged on to Hillsborough County Library and was going to read Newsweek, and it brought up a Newsweek magazine that was called Indian. And it was all about the people from India. And I read an article about Modi, their president, and how President Trump tried to intercede with him with Pakistan. And he made it very clear to President Trump that he wasn't going to take any of that. And his political party, I think they called them the JDLs, supported him. And, they fought back. And so immediately Donald Trump started going after the immigrants from India in the United States and deported almost 3,000 of them and imposed a tariff of 25%. So, I understand, where you're coming from, and I know that people like me, are looking for alternative news sources, to try to get information and get another opinion, because without facts, you can't make an informed decision. And I just want to commend, governments that are holding their own, that aren't like, Israel. Now that Israel has, made this alliance with America, it's almost as if, Now they just have to buy more guns and more weapons and soon, a nuclear bomb or whatever's next. And it's just like, no, you don't need to do that. All you need to do is say no to America. Let us handle our own problems.
All right. Thanks for your comment, Jack. I'm not sure which article on Newsweek that was referring to, but the current leader of India is Modi. I'm also not a fan of Modi. However, if he's elected by his people, he answers to his people. Now, of course, but that's the thing. Donald Trump, some people describe his style of governing, and when it comes to foreign policy, is, kind of like a little bit like a mafia. He'll apply a lot of pressure to get what he wants. And that will include, putting pressure on, as you said, if, Indian people in America or Indian immigrants in America. It seems like the Somali Americans, these are American citizens that happen to be of Somalian background in Minnesota. They're in the crosshairs of Trump right now. He keeps talking against them. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure some of you have heard about the interview that he did with the New York Times, where famously the takeaway from that was when they asked him, are there any checks to his power? Is there any, does he have any limits to his power? Meaning like international law, the United States Constitution. What are his limits? And he said, my own mind, my own judgment, my own moral compass. And then some people reacted to that saying, well, that means basically he has no limits because, he hasn't shown that he has good judgment. There's some things that he might be getting right. I can't recall them right now. But for the most part, when a president is elected, whether we vote for him individually or not, he takes an oath to abide by the Constitution and to follow the law. But it seems like this administration either interprets those laws, the very same laws that others interpret and have interpreted in the same way for decades, if it's not, a couple of centuries, and they interpret them differently. And people are concerned about that. Where does this power end, and when will Congress do their role? I mean, look what happened in Minnesota with Renee Good, the woman who was shot in the face by, an ICE officer. And then, okay, it's not what makes me upset is not what happened to her. I mean, of course, that's horrific. What makes me more upset are so many people that are justifying it. In the past, even in local levels, if a police officer kills a civilian, right away, the person is suspended, put on leave, an investigation starts. But before any of that, within minutes, on social media, government officials from official accounts and on television, and the Secretary of Homeland Security, they go on TV and they defend the agent's actions immediately and blame the woman who was killed. You guys, they weren't there. They don't know, what took place. So we've become this society where even the government officials are just kind of like trolls. They don't wait for the facts. And not only that, they dig in and try to make sure that an investigation doesn't take place. They're denying the local authorities, the local police, state police in Minnesota to participate or to do their own investigation. They're blocking it. Who's going to get justice for Renee Good? You're talking about protesters getting killed in Iran. There are protesters getting killed in America. And it's not some grainy video. This is pretty clear. Who killed who? And even the body cam or the phone cam, the point of view from the office, the agent, I guess they call them agents, the ICE officer or ICE agent, federal police, even the phone in his own hand shows what happened. And everything that they said about Renee Good turned out to be false. She was an agitator. She was smiling in the video, saying, I'm not mad at you. Hey, dude, I'm not mad at you. Those were her last words. Or I'm pulling out is the last words. She was leaving the place. They're claiming that she was blocking the road, even though she was waving cars by her, saying, go ahead. And some of the cars passed her. And she was clearly pulling out. And her girlfriend was getting in the car, about to open the door, get in. She's pulling out. The guy's pulling on, another agent's pulling on her car, telling her to get out. Didn't identify himself. And her, wheels are clear. She's doing pulling back so she can make, right turn so she can. But I think if you watch that video, especially the video where the agent himself, I forgot his name, the one that did the shooting, the shooter, he was holding his phone in his right hand. And he was filming as he was circling the car and getting the license plate. All of that, he had his iPhone or his phone in his right hand as he was recording. But when he was on the passenger side and his girlfriend started kind of not taunting him, but making fun of him, saying, go grab lunch, big boy. At that point, he wasn't in front of the car. You can visibly see that he switched the phone from his right hand to his left hand. And that, to me, is incriminating, meaning that's where he decided he's going to pull out his gun. He made a decision then. He wasn't in harm's way. That's when he decided, I'm going to need my gun. He wasn't in front of the car. He was on the passenger side. And between him and the car was even the girlfriend of Renee, or the wife. And that's when he switched hands. Now he switched that so he could have access to his gun, which is, he's right-handed, is on his right hip. Then, as Renee was looking the other direction and pulling out, he put himself in front of her car. That to me is very incriminating. And the fact that you shoot through the side window, you're already in the clear. And then the expletive that he said after he shot her is very telling about his intent. He should be arrested. The very least, there should be an investigation. If you can't put your politics aside and agree on that, then you're losing your own moral compass. It's very clear. The very least, there should be an investigation. A thorough investigation, independent, and not by ICE. They're the ones that did the shooting. And that kind of nonsense has to stop. Don't tell me about people getting shot in Iran. That is bad. But you're shooting people here in America. Following your policies. So this is Randy from Gulfport. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, Ahmed. I was taken aback when President Trump was indicating that he was going to send help to the Iran protesters, when all I've gathered over the last several months is that this is a man that would probably be willing to turn guns on our own protesters in the street. It's really a weird irony that he would do that, but he's always kind of revealed who he is, and people just, some go along with it and some write it down and say this man is not right, about his idea of how he wants this democracy to work in America, which would not be a democracy if his blueprint came into full fruition. I also wanted to ask you if I could get the text number where you could maybe text me some publications on the history of Zionism. One show several months back where you were speaking about today's general interpretation of our Christian New Testament, and I don't know about the Old Testament part, but that it was kind of designed by a Zionist, or he had great influence in that. I find that very troubling, and I'd like to, maybe by text, you could put me on to a couple publications, if they are even in the library, to help me get a better understanding. I'm currently trying to read through the Israel Lobby. I'm sure you're familiar with that book.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of slow going at it, and I think it's already overdue, but I plan to finish it, and it has a lot of revealing information on, our history with Israel, and I'd just like to get more facts regarding.
Okay, thanks, Randy. So if you want to message with me, you can send me a message at dj@wmnf.org. I'm sorry. That's if you want to message me right now. But if you want to message me off air, send a message to True Talk at WMNF.org. True Talk at WMNF.org. The book you're referring to, that you're reading, is The Israel Lobby by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, which came out in 2007. It caused a lot of ruckus, and of course the pro-Israel lobby and the Zionist groups tried to cancel them, which kind of reinforced what their book actually says. Yeah, it's a good book. What you're referring to about the Bible is called the Scofield Bible. Scofield Bible. It was commissioned by Rothschild, and it's from 1917. It's basically like a study Bible. It's called the Old Scofield Study Bible, King James Version, Classic Edition, 1917 notes. So it's kind of a study Bible that would have these notes on the side to describe things and indexes. And that played a huge role in American understanding of Christianity and influence on churches. And it's kind of central. It's now become central, especially in the Christian Zionist beliefs. If you remember the interview between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, where basically Ted Cruz says, it's his belief, it's his job as a Christian to bless the state of Israel. And Tucker Carlson saying, state of Israel was not even around back then. The modern state of Israel that we know today surely is not the same as the one that's mentioned in the Bible. And, there was this big disagreement over that. But yeah, that wasn't always the case. If it's part of Christianity to bless Israel, then why is it that for centuries, the major proponents of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hatred were Christian churches in Europe? Those were the ones that are pushing the hatred of Jews. And that's even before Zionism. And Jews were put into ghettos. They eventually, they sought safety in Muslim majority countries that actually protected Jews and the Jewish communities, because as Muslims cannot just attack Jews. And they actually, it's part of Islam to believe that Judaism is a legitimate religion from God. But my understanding of what those, verses in the Old Testament mean when they talk about, this covenant between God. It wasn't a covenant between God and the state of Israel. It was a covenant between God and Abraham. And he basically says that, that he's going to bless his progeny and bless the people that bless Abraham, somehow. And if it's reference Israel in the Old Testament actually refers, Israel was the name of Jacob. Jacob is a descendant of Abraham. Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. Jacob's other name was Israel. So when it talks about, mentions blessing Israel, it's really means Jacob. And maybe that extends to his, 12 children that became, they stretched the meaning that somehow, Jacob had 12 children and they became the 12 tribes of Israel. Why do they call them the children of Israel? Because they're the children of Jacob. Jacob's other name is Israel. And that's why they're called the children of Israel, meaning they're the children of Jacob. Look up the Scofield Bible, which was commissioned by the Rothschild, and it was a way to try to influence Christianity to make it more Zionist. And some churches were impacted by that. Our phone number is 813-239-9663. And email is dj@wmnf.org. If you want to email, let me see if I've received any email. And killing a citizen. Okay, this message. Yes, Americans are being killed here in America. I really, really hope that the Iranian in the world is seeing the government killing people for demonstrating, which is constitutional right. Thank you. The people are seeing, they're shocked, but people are also seeing the double standard. Of course, there are protesters that may be killed, that may have been killed in Iran. I don't know the number. But they're also saying that there's a lot of Mossad agents on the streets of Iran that are fighting and instigating a lot of these things. One of the places that was burned in Iran during these protests was a mosque. And some of these Iran or Persian people in diaspora, like me, outside, like here in the West, in America and in Canada and other places, some of them were celebrating it as they waved the Israeli flag. What does that mean? How are you going to celebrate? You claim you're from Iran and you're celebrating the burning of a mosque in your country? A lot of people from Iran are actually saying, yeah, we may be against the regime, but we are definitely against America and Israel coming in and doing any of this stuff. So thank you, Irene, for that message. Betty sends a message saying, I agree with you on everything. Your show is informative and you're both fair-minded and your commentary. Betty from Sarasota. I don't know. I don't want to judge, but Betty might be Jewish because I think she called in before. And actually, I don't know. I see Betty is on the phone now. So are you emailing and calling in? Are you the same Betty?
Yes, I am. I decided to call you as well. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm surprised that you're both on my email and on the phone. Go ahead. Thank you for calling.
I couldn't resist. Of course, Ahmed, I've been following your show for many, 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 many years. Anyway, and I enjoy it, and I do feel that you're both very honest and forthcoming. I get a lot of flack from my fellow Jews. I am indeed Jewish. I'm not a wildly practicing person. I'm traditional, but that's about it. So I'm not a remotely religious person. So, I don't go by New Testament or Old Testament texts or anything like that because we don't really know who wrote them and when and how and so forth. So that's just too far back. But in my estimation, what you're saying about, first of all, that the Christian world was really much more anti-Semitic than the Arab world has ever been, is absolutely 100% right. My parents were Holocaust survivors, and they grew up in a lineage in Poland as Jews, and it was never, ever really comfortable. That's one thing. And yes, Jews have been chased around and killed and persecuted since the time of Isabella in the late 1400s. So it was a miserable time for Jews for centuries. And yet, we Jews lived among and with Muslims and Arab populations for centuries. And we're very comfortable. We were allowed to prosper. We were integrated. You don't hear stories of massacres on Jews. I just haven't heard of anything like that. From North African countries like, Morocco, Syria, Iran, and so forth. Turkey, certainly not. Anyway, my point is that I think what most people are forgetting is that things were decent for the Jews and Arabs living together for most of the history. There were very few Jews living in Israel for these last 2,000 years. We came by the tens, if not hundreds of thousands after World War II, and that's when all hell broke loose. So it was just a matter of a few powerful Brits and a few powerful Americans making decisions for millions of people. And there is the problem. And then when you get a population that's beleaguered and persecuted and angry and exhausted, they're going to do everything to make sure that their lives are bettered. And that usually comes with the persecution of the next group of people. And the Arabs were a threat to them. They weren't comfortable. They didn't know the language. They didn't know the culture. They were different looking, different behaving, perhaps. And the Jews systematically had their militias, Palmach, Irgun, all kinds, Kach, and so forth. There were many, many people through these last decades who took it upon themselves to expel and burn villages. And, of course, we know that approximately 700,000 people were expelled from Israel alone. So that's the history that many people refuse to look at or deny or don't know. And it's very important to see how the dynamics changed so quickly that you can imagine how a horrible, horrific massacre could have happened on October 7th because it didn't happen in a vacuum. We're talking about decades of oppression and terrible policies, hundreds or not even thousands of checkpoints, making it impossible and making these people miserable. How do you not expect uprisings to occur? So that's really my spiel for the day.
Betty, just before we go, because we only have less than a minute left, but you're Jewish. It seems like you grew up in America. But so how is what formed this opinion? How do you have this information where so many other people don't, especially in the Jewish community?
Well, it's called reading books, and I've read many, many articles and books by Jewish historians and Jewish writers who to this day are still writing for Haaretz, like Gideon Levy. People should check out Gideon Levy. Check out Mira Haas, who's lived in the West Bank with Jews. She's Jewish. Her mother was a Holocaust survivor and a writer. She's an esteemed writer. She's been on Democracy Now! Again, her name is Amira Haas, and she's lived with the Arab population for decades and has written scathing reports on not just the IDF, but the population in general, and how it's dealt with the apartheid. I've read books by Miko Peled, who wrote the famous, fantastic book called The General's Son. People should read it. It's a small, easy-to-read book, and it really spells out everything. And he grew up with a top general father who was on the inside and knew everything, and he knew the original leaders of the country. He knew Moshe Dayan. He knew Golda Meir. He knew everybody. And so when you're hearing it from Jewish people, Israelis, and then you're hearing from former officials from not just Mossad, but also from the defense forces who are saying that they went beyond the pale in this recent genocide, that the war should have been over and done with in less than 1 year, and we keep going on and on. How do we expect